it, huh?
today,
Yeah, keepers.
All right, cameras running.
Camera's running, all right,
So,
let's get started.
whenever you want to, you're welcome to get started whenever you like.
Awesome, all right. Welcome, everybody, we'll get started. I'm sorry for being a minute or two late. I had a meeting that ran a little long out of town, and I made it though. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you.
So I will try to speak as loud as I can. Is that better?
Yeah.
Hi?
You want us to move closer because there's so many of us?
Yeah, if you want to come closer, that would be great.
Yeah, we'll move closer so we can. Yeah, I'm sitting back here.
Sam, you're staying, aren't you? He's like, I'm not moving. You're good. You can hear me fine? If I'm not loud enough, say something. What's that?
It's those young ears.
Young ears.
It's those young ears.
Oh, young ears. Got it.
The acoustics in here is not good.
Okay.
Any other complaints?
All right, did you write that down? Acoustics aren't good in here. You can write that
Acoustics
one
not
down.
good.
That's first comment.
I think Todd
So-
knows that, right, Todd?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I don't think they're coming in. Okay. So, all right, we can get started. So, thanks for coming tonight. And really, these listening sessions are for you. If you have questions and/or comments for me to share with the board and myself, and I'll give you opinions if I have one on anything. And it's really the night for you. Topics are whatever you'd like the topics to be. So, if you would, I think I know just about everybody here except for this gentleman.
Oh yeah, I'm on the list.
Yep.
Kevin.
Or Kevin.
Should I check it twice?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay,
Sam.
all right.
Yeah,
Oh, Kevin, there you go.
Kevin,
Oh,
thank you.
okay, yeah, all right, perfect. So, questions, comments on anything tonight? Go ahead, Mary.
So I kind of want to thank you a little bit for you defending the central part of town when Gary said he would like to see something done with Main Street through 7th and 8th Street. I would like to see the CDA come and take a look at our neighborhood. We have a vibrant, robust neighborhood. And why Gary seems to think something needs to be done with it, every time I hear him say that, and it's been at least 2 or 3 times, I myself have put thousands of dollars into the home I own there. A neighbor across the street is putting a ton of money. A neighbor on the corner of where I live and another street is putting money in. Down the street on 5th Street, people are remodeling. We have apartments, we have condos, not condos there, duplexes. There's a triplex in the neighborhood where I live on the street on the corner. I don't know what he thinks needs to be done, but I would like that kind of verbiage to be curtailed because to me, it's condescending to all of us who live there, and it's upsetting. I was so upset when I heard that. I thought, oh my God, are you kidding me? Again, he's attacking my neighborhood. So I would encourage you to encourage the CDA when these kind of conversations are happening to take a look at our neighborhood from Main Street to 7th and 8th and just see how beautiful we are.
Okay, I don't know if I should respond, or do you want me to respond to that, or?
Well, you kind of stood up for us that night a little bit, but it's up to you if you want to respond or not. I would just like to know or have people aware that we are doing great things in our neighborhood.
I
I
think
guess
that,
maybe to add on to that before you respond,
Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
what precipitated that? What was the background? Why all of a sudden, I mean, that kind of comment just didn't come out of the blue.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was some backstory behind it, and maybe that's what we need to know a little bit more about to make an adequate, to understand things more adequately.
Sure, and one of the hardest things of any government official is when you're speaking to people, sometimes you're meaning something this way and people take it this way. And that's unfortunate. It just happens. And I don't want to speak for Gary because Gary's who made the comment. But my interpretation from what that conversation was a little different than yours, Mary. Not that yours is wrong, or mine is right, I'm not saying that. My interpretation was, we were talking about how we could use TIF funds from extending our TIFs by a year and what we could use those towards. Now, Gary used the example of downtown, maybe because it's, and again, he was the one that said it, so I'm trying to interpret. Maybe it's because he's feeling those are older homes, that maybe we could be using funds towards those older homes. Not necessarily that we were saying that's the bad zone of the community, it's how can we use those funds? So if people need new windows or they need a new roof, could those be things that we could put into there? And he chose that section of town to use for his example, but I took it as, okay, he's putting it out there to say we could put monies towards those types of things and have a process for people to apply for a $5,000 grant or whatever it might be. We haven't established that yet, that's what we're working towards. So that was my interpretation of it, was that he was using that as an example. Maybe he shouldn't have picked that neighborhood. He could have just said village-wide for those folks that may need assistance.
So we're not talking about just trying to basically level the place to a parking lot and build something new, but it's
No.
much more, it's much more involved.
No.
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot and try to read what's in his mind. I mean, I have a hard time trying to figure out what's in my mind sometimes, so.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Right, okay.
The downtown is the downtown. We had to go through a lawsuit because I protected the downtown from somebody who wanted to do what you're talking about. Not that, and it was interesting because I felt like I was in the middle of that whole thing. That people thought I was trying to do something that I wasn't trying to do. And I was placed in that position. That's an interpretation thing that I'm talking about. And the best way to get those interpretations is to ask the questions like you just did. That's so important. So important as we go through this. Any topic we're talking about. Because people have different views on it, and that's okay. There's, we all, I hope at least, we all as board members or as community members want what's best for Waunakee. For all the people of Waunakee. And, those decisions, we're not always going to agree on how we get there. As long as we get there, that's the important thing.
Well, thanks, Chris. I, for one, appreciate the clarification. Thanks for taking the time to educate at least me and what's going on and what maybe some of the thought process might be, and where things are possibly headed. So that's cool.
Sure. Well, so that's just what we're talking about the CDA, as Mary was kind of alluding to what Gary was saying. That's what that's about. And when the board first took that on, and we were going through that process, it was our project right next to McDonald's, and name of it? I can't remember right now.
Oh, the
Cohen Esri
Cohen
project.
Esri.
The Cohen Esri project was asking for a large sum, and it was going to take up the majority, if not all, of those funds. And my comment at the board was, we should probably have something in place before we just give all the money to one spot. Because there might be other needs that we have, and if the money's gone, it's gone. It's not something that replenishes. Okay, so some people interpreted that as he's against that project. Well, that's not the case at all. It was, we need to have a system in place at the board so we can look objectively and say, what's the maximum amount we should be giving out to any one project? So people can interpret what you're doing differently for different reasons. And it wasn't that I was trying to delay or make the project not happen. It was, we need to have a policy in place, which we didn't before that. And that's what the CDA is working through now. Still, we made a decision because we had to with Cohen Esri, where we were comfortable with what we were giving them, and still have funding available, which we do now. So, did you have that camera? Did you take that off?
I can put on whatever you like.
The picture you had up there of the downtown, everything actually. We can come back to it though. Other questions, comments about things happening?
So there was a question about lighting. Can you tell me, and Sam was telling me about a dark sky ordinance, can you tell me what that ordinance is? So, people were questioning the lighting online.
Oh, lighting.
We talked the street lights, and there are people saying that there's not enough street lights, but I know Waunakee has some sort of ordinance. Can you tell me what that is called, dark sky or something like that? I remember it being discussed at other village board meetings and how much lighting there should and shouldn't be to keep the skies
So I think you're
bright.
talking about light pollution.
Light pollution, yes.
Is where you're going
So
with that?
what's the specific ordinance on that? Or what is,
So I don't know what the specific
Well,
ordinance is. Tim may know that better, but I do know that the one time it really came up was when we were looking at putting lights on the tennis courts in Rick Park.
right,
And one of the residents, or I don't remember who it was, but they said the National Dark Sky Association was opposed to us putting those lights on. And it,
so Wanakee itself does not have an ordinance?
I think there's probably a light capacity for businesses.
I do believe that Westport has a very stringent restriction.
Yeah, and I gave the people the village's email, and because somebody said that section was actually in Westport, so I gave them the village's email, and I gave them Westport's contact information. I said, you want to talk to your boards and stuff, but I'm just curious if we do or do not have that kind of ordinance.
I mean, Tim, you probably would be able to know the ordinance, but I would just say that from my perspective, lighting is necessary for safety, most importantly. So if there's an area that's dark, it needs to have, whatever the minimums are so people can see, especially, with our streets. This actually just came up, we're talking about our parade for Light the Night on December 3rd. I think it's December 3rd. So some of the organizers wanted to turn off Main Street's lights so the floats that would come down would be standing out. And Police Chief Kreitzman and I both said no. We don't think that's a good idea because there's so many people that are running around, especially little children. During that, we shouldn't have the lights off because it takes 5 minutes for them to come back on. So that wouldn't make any sense for us to do that. So that I look at lighting as that's a safety thing for us. But there's going to be people that may not want a light that's going to be placed new right outside their home that's going to shine in their window. Nobody's going to be for that. But you probably have the ordinance. Yes?
That's what I'm looking at. So generally, there are lighting standards that specify a certain light threshold at a property line. But to speak to, does the village have a specific dark sky ordinance? I don't think so. But there are lighting standards.
Okay.
Chris, you introduce him, please? We have people here who don't know who this person is.
He's a random guy on the street that I was driving by and he looked like I know something, so I called him. Go ahead, Tim. Why don't you introduce?
Good job.
Go ahead, Tim. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Tim Seven. I'm the village's community development director.
Hi.
I've been here a little over 4 months. I was previously planning director for the city of Sun Prairie. And so I'm one of the staff people helping with the CDA, to your previous question, helping and working on this policy. So in my role as the community development director and planning and zoning administrator, also responsible for administering the village's municipal zoning code. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to call me, shoot me an email, etc. I'd be happy to talk to you about that.
Does anybody not know Todd?
Never seen him before in my life.
Okay. You left an opening for me there, but I'm not going to take that one. So, okay, other questions, comments? You all have the floor. It's whatever you want to talk about.
Oh, I'll ask another one then.
Shoot, go ahead, Mary.
So, the finance committee, are you going to be putting regular citizens from the village on the finance committee?
Yeah,
So that there is citizen membership on that again?
Yeah, so originally that was disbanded, or just to have the 3 board members by Dave Ferris, finance director. The next appointment session that we have, so that's generally April, right?
Mhm.
April, we'll be adding citizen members back to it.
Okay.
Does it meet before then? Does it meet before then?
I think you said, does it meet before that?
Correct.
Does it, the finance committee?
Yes.
Yeah, the finance committee usually meets 3 or 4 times a year. Right now, we just finished the budget. So I don't know if we'll have another meeting before
Yeah.
April or not.
Finance committee is typically as needed.
Yeah.
Typically review the audit and review the budget policies and
Right.
budget proposal. That's usually the extent unless there's a special project like review of the banking RFP or proposals from financial institutions for municipal services. So those have been the only,
I want to say there's 3 or 4 meetings a year. So, and right now, we just finished the biggest one, which was the budget. So I don't think we would meet probably before April again. Don't quote me on that. I might, it might. Renee usually calls those meetings as needed, as Todd said. But yes, I intend to reinstate that.
Related to the budget stuff, I'm trying to understand how the process works. So one of the comments when the budget was introduced by Renee was that you said, we're going to hold the tax levy limit to 3.5%. And is that something that you determine yourself, or does the village board have a vote on that before you?
So as village president, I meet with staff, meaning Todd and Renee, and we talk through the budget and where things are lining up. And that may be anywhere from, maybe we're going to have a tax refund to we're going to have a 7% increase. And if we have a 7% increase, they inform me of what those things are in a meeting. And when I look at it and see, all right, what could we cut? What should we make sure we keep? What are, most of the things are already in place, as you probably heard, as far as what the finances were for this budget. I don't remember the exact number, but it was probably 90% of the budget was already stuff that was there, that we weren't really, unless we were going to cut it, it was going to be in the budget. So then it's just a matter of where is that number that is an acceptable number to me, and then we present to the board, and the board looks at all of those things that they were presented the other night.
So I'm going back. So when you determine that you want to hold this levy, you do that as one person versus the board making that decision. And I'm just kind of wondering if the board can be involved in that later on.
You're wondering if they could be?
Yes.
Is that what the question? I
know the answer.
I'm just making sure I'm hearing it right. So, so the question was, could the board be more involved with the initial setting of what that number is?
Correct.
What's the answer to that? I don't. Do I have?
well, I will
any-
tell you that early in the process is a very difficult time as we don't have the full extent of the budgetary numbers, particularly from organizations that we lack, I guess you could say, control over. The budget request from fire department or EMS, and when at the point at which we get some initial feedback from Chris to establish some guideposts for us, there's still moving elements that can have a significant impact on the budget. And I guess to engage the board in a really early process can be a step, it's like a step forward and then there's a couple steps back, and it could require this back and forth that could be really complicated and tricky for anyone to make sense of. So that's why we've run it the way we have, because of how complicated that grinding process becomes, and the pace at which numbers become available. I mean, we can certainly involve the board earlier in maybe big picture financial discussions about where, tax rate satisfaction in general. We have had Ellers help us with projecting tax rate impacts into the future. So to the extent that the board would want to be more involved early, that's possible. The question is, how productive is that going to be with the outcomes that I think maybe you're alluding to, which is 3 months earlier in the budget process for the board to say 3% is our number when certain key factors aren't known. I think it's tricky I think it would be tricky for a board to feel confident at that point. But like I said, we can look at other approaches to engaging the board in a process.
So, I haven't had any board members approach me that they don't like the process. I
This
also,
is just something I caught
yeah,
when you were
I would
explaining.
also say that if a board member, when they get their budgets and see what's in the budget, if there's something that they see that they say, hey, I'd like to see more money in this spot, that's absolutely something we can discuss. And then that number is going to fluctuate. If it goes over 3.5, that's fine. I'm just setting something at a bar there. If Sam or Gary or whoever wants to be at, I think we should spend X amount of dollars on this, and that makes it 5%, that's 5%. I'm not going to hold it there. We're just trying to formulate a budget that's as conservative as we can be with the budget, so we don't have a huge tax impact on people. We could say, well, we're going to put the pool in, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to have a 27% increase in taxes. We could start there. And then go down from that. That's another option of what we could do. But I think that we've been very diligent with our budget to make sure that we don't have huge tax increases. Even when we got our reassessments and everything, for the most part, it was a pretty level line for the last 10 years on your taxes, which is great. When you look at what we're able to accomplish in Wanakee, with those tax dollars, I commend our staff every day at the job they do to make sure that we have a solid budget and that they meet their budgets. And they're not going over. And you see that year in, year out. We look at it based on a zero-based budget. We really don't want to have any increases if we don't have to. And, a little difference between John Lobmeyer and myself is that John really was very, very conservative about hiring people. And didn't really want to hire people. You didn't see a lot of hires during his time. Because one of the things that's a huge bite into the budget is people. It's our largest expense. So when we have people that propose hires in different places, we have to very carefully look at that. It's one thing to buy a building, that's a set cost, you know what that's going to be. All right, it's not increasing every year. Your payment on it's not going to increase. Employees increase. So it becomes more expensive. But I'm a person that's, if our public works department isn't getting the job done with the resources they have and they need people, and they bring it, it's going to get proposed to the board. There's very few things that don't come to the board when our staff asks for them. But we ask them to start every year at a zero-based budget, which means no increases for them. Then they come to us with things, if they need them. And right now, one of them was the library that's happening with it. So they're required. Did that answer your question?
In a lot of the way, yes. I guess part of my question is, how do other communities do it? Because it seems like you have an awful lot of power setting. I'm not saying that you're doing it wrong. It seems that there's a lot of power taxpayers in one country. Do other communities do it this way, or do they have their board involved early on? Or do you know that?
It's a mixed bag. I would say that, the first budget was presented about a month ago to the village board. We've had one meeting since then, and then we have our hearing next week. If a month ago when we met with the board, and the board had collectively decided to give a different instruction, and let's say to I and the management team to modify the budget so as to not have a 2% bottom line impact on the average homeowner, that would have been an exercise that staff would have been able to achieve in working with staff. So while Chris gives us a guidepost a couple months before that, I still see a lot of room and opportunity for the board to modify that direction as we go through the process. So and Chris knows, and I say this a lot, that it is the board's budget. It is the collective 7-member board's budget. And they need to be satisfied with what they approve.
Okay. Other questions? Hi, are we doing okay? Are you hearing everything?
Sort of. It's just, this room is not good. I mean, I love the room, it's the sound is
Okay.
Where are things at with the Cohen Esri project? I see that things are happening over there, but I just wondering, is it going on schedule, or are there being delays at all, or running into any issues? Or, I mean, it looks like it's going along pretty well.
Yeah, there, like many other projects, we've heard from builders and developers that there is a delay because of the whole supply chain thing, so it is impacting projects in Wanakee. They're generally on schedule, but you may wonder, for example, like I was talking to the owner of D-Power today, and he was talking about some issues that they're having with metal and some prefab panels and things like that. And so they're a few months behind schedule.
Oh, wow.
Because of supply, exactly, their supply chain issues. So they're, for the most part, on schedule, maybe a little bit behind, but they're doing okay.
Thank you.
Hi, any questions?
I just came to listen.
It's called a listening session, so that you're doing just fine. Other topics?
Has anybody talked about the pool?
I just alluded to that with the budget thing, but no, nobody's talked about the pool. What question?
I'm just going to give feedback on some of the stuff I heard, because actually I really want to see what's happening. But one of the things I did in that survey was that it's all about what we like, and it's, we like all kinds of stuff, and there were no price tags attached. When you had the first thing a couple years ago, they kind of gave the different options that, high-end, and so I don't know if that's part of the study or how they're going to present that when it comes to referendum. Maybe you can address that.
Yeah, so, did we get the results yet? Have you seen them?
Just the preliminary ones still. The final ones, I haven't seen them.
So, we haven't seen anything at the board that you haven't seen at this point. And the consultant is going through and trying to find out from the community. They're the experts of this, right? Is anybody else a pool expert in here? Okay, or developing a pool? All right, so they're the experts. I'm not the expert on that. They were hired for that purpose to say, all right, what can Wanakee do as far as a pool right now? And what do the residents want in that pool? Or what don't the residents want in that pool? Or the residents may just not want a pool. So that's their job in assembling all of that and helping us to devise a question for referendum. And that's the process that's going through right now. I think we have another time scheduled, I think, with the consultants. But it's not the board, the people that we're working with.
The task force group or the work group that's working on it.
So I think what's happening is that they're coming back with the results to that task force, and that task force is going to hear all those things, and then they're going to do a presentation to the village board, which is open to the public, of course, and we'll hear what they're suggesting that we do for a referendum.
That's on the 22nd of November. It's called the Aquatics Work Group, is going to be hearing from the consultant.
Okay.
I'm glad it's moving forward. I'm just giving you some of the feedback that people are asking tonight. They have the same question.
Yeah, it's going through the process right now. I think it's a solid process that we have. It's very, the board is not influencing what is going to happen at all. We're letting everybody in the community say, hey, this is what we'd like, this is what we would like, and then they need to put that together for us. We'll see those surveys. Everybody can see the surveys once they're done and put together, but they're going to give us their professional opinion. We still might not agree with that professional opinion. The voters might not agree with that professional opinion, is what I'm saying. So when that referendum question comes out, people might say, hey, we don't agree with that. Or they may say, that makes good sense, and vote for it.
Did a lot of people do the survey, or were they lazy about it?
We had, I believe we're at over 1,600 responses, so it was a very well
I hope so.
responded to process.
Because that night we had that meeting, hardly anybody was there. Well, that was the second. Yeah, I know. But still, I thought more people would show up.
I say that every time we have a listening session. But
Still, he gets stuck with all of us that come on a regular basis.
and it's all good. I wish a lot of people would come, but sometimes it's just schedules and people are busy and they don't want to take the time for it. Is really what it comes down to. So.
I know, they just don't bother, and yet they complain, or they ask, and I say, well, why didn't you go?
You hearing complaints? There's no complaint. There's no complaints. Come on. No, I'm kidding. We're through this. Okay.
So is there a spot fixed for them? a spot picked out for the pool already? Do you have a place in mind? Would that
Location, a location?
be? Yes.
They're still going through that, figuring that part of it out too. I mean, if you want potential spots, you know, well, you could have it out by the hockey rink. There's space out there. You could have it, we have the park that's on, I should know the name of the road, some like workplaces there. Water Wheel? So there's already, so right down there as you're coming into Wanakee, that's a spot potential. There's a potential for it to be near the intermediate school on Woodland out there. So there's all, you know, it's a matter of where's the space going to be
Right.
available
Right.
and the potentials for that.
It's also a matter of what does the community say it desires in terms of a facility, because that impacts the space needs.
Correct. So those will come, and all of that will end up with, what's the price tag going to be based on those.
That's interesting. 'Cause I think I asked half a dozen people to come with me to that last meeting, and nobody come. Then the next day, they all asked me what was said. And I said, why didn't you come? So. Jeez.
It's been my experience from not being on the internet that everything is on the internet. If you need to know, it's there. Right? I'm kidding, I assume that's the case, but maybe not. What else?
Can we talk a little bit about any possible or any proposed developments that might be happening on the Main Street area within a couple blocks of the roundabout, either right on Main or on Century Avenue? I've heard that the bowling alley might be up for sale, and then across the street that there's a little U.S. Bank drive up by Carl's Dentistry that might be up for sale, and that there are possibilities of apartment buildings going in, and I'm just wondering if that's just pie in the sky rumor that I've heard, or if there's any, any fire as opposed to just smoke.
So here's what I know for sure. Is that for sale?
Okay?
I don't know of any of them for sure. But I've heard, just like you thought, that Wanabo may be for sale, or is for sale. I've heard that the U.S. Bank building is for sale. And that's located right here.
Yeah,
Right
right.
where that is. So that's their driveway there. So that one is. As far as development, you have about this section here, you mean?
Yeah, that
Now
section
Street,
too, right. Say down to O'Malley or
I'll just go to Fish, I guess. Okay, so Sweet Pea's here, yeah. So, I don't know any develop. You guys would hear this more than I, you would probably hear it.
Yeah, so there, if I can, there's one site, it's not a new development per se, but 207 West Main on the north side. One to the left. You're big red, really? Yep, right there. Yep. So Weston Dunn Law Office is expanding, and they're going to be moving into that building to be doing some renovations. So that plan was before the plan commission just this past Monday, and was conditionally approved. So that's the only one that we know is happening.
That's the one that's next to like
It's the red brick.
Yeah, right. Got it. Okay.
But I don't think they're like, making any substantial outside changes other than maybe fixing it up a little bit.
Well, they're going to be replacing the exterior to make it look a lot nicer, but it's going to look very similar to what it is now, for sure, like updated. And then on the back, on the north side of the building, they're adding a small parking lot, and then a two-story expansion that essentially extends that house out. You won't really be able to see that well from Main Street, but again, it's to accommodate an expanded development.
Tim, do you want to talk about your plan or your goal
Sure,
in front
sure.
of you in terms of doing visioning work along
Yes.
the corridor?
Yeah. As far as apartments, I haven't heard any apartment talk about going in those places.
In this corridor,
Where we just talked about, so where one wall is and
no.
the bank, I don't think the
Not,
bank would be big enough space for apartments to go into. maybe a duplex, but not an apartment, it wouldn't be big.
Well, there was a proposal half a year or so ago on that US Bank parcel. It didn't get,
When you say a proposal, do you mean somebody proposed to the bank or proposed to us?
yeah, a local developer proposed to us. It really didn't get that far past the staff level of review, but that concept they were proposing was a relatively small mixed-use project, but would involve apartments on upper floors. So if that's what you've heard, it would have been related to a local developer who had put forward a concept proposal, but that proposal is no longer in the works.
So what I can tell you too is having worked at Sun Prairie not that long ago and now working here, and then talking to our associates from other communities, multifamily projects in general, there's a lot of tire kicking going on by the development community because there's a demonstrable housing shortage in Dane County overall. So what I can tell you is we've had developers ask in general about multifamily, but where Todd wanted me to go is so the corridor that's shown right now generally on the street, on the screen rather, up from the north side of Rex's to about 4th Street, maybe a little bit south, but in this general area, we're going to be beginning fairly soon a visioning process for what that corridor should look like. So just like in years past, Main Street, the eastern portion of Main Street, a plan was created and it took some time to get implemented because some of the properties are starting to turn over and some of this area, the lands in this corridor may need a little bit more facelift and things like that. We're going to be formally asking the community the question, like pool, what do you want to see here? What do you want this to look like in the future? And so that's a process that's going to be undertaken fairly soon. But I can tell you that it's very likely that many from the development community will say, hey, what do you think about apartments? So it shouldn't come as a surprise by at least the development community that would likely be a desired use there. Now, whether the community will go for that, we'll see.
So that visioning process is going to be, that's a year-long, that's a year-long scope of work. That's community surveys, that's charrette processes where people are together playing with Lego houses, that's engagement meetings with stakeholders, landowners. So that will be a very public, very engaging scope of work that Tim will be undertaking for us.
Well, thank you.
So imminent is not, there's not any imminent to be built on this.
Imminent's not the word we're using, no. Lengthy discussion periods along the way.
Yeah.
But also want to be cognizant of the realism of the development community wanting that product, not just here, almost any community.
Yeah, I would say in the past year, just taking the bowling alley property, for instance, I know that it was at least for sale in the recent past. I can't say for certain today, but the property owner had their broker contact me about about the future of the site, and Tim is right. The tire kicking from the development community for multifamily is a very real phenomenon in our region. And, I'd say over the course of the past 12 months, there's been a couple developers who have approached us saying, hey, the bowling alley property is for sale. We're a multifamily developer. What are the opportunities? And obviously nothing has come about, just very initial conversations, but I'm happy to be honest with you about the type of conversations we have and that we hear.
Great, thanks.
And I've spoken to Scott Adler at Luongo, and I think their intent is they'd love to have another bowling alley user come there. They would love that to happen. Now, how long they're going to be willing to wait to find that buyer that's going to want to continue to the bowling alley, that's the thing for them. As a landowner, they have the control there.
I'd hate to miss those cheeseburgers, right? They have great cheeseburgers at the bowling alley. Yeah.
I mean, we
Absolutely.
have called that block out and other areas out as sensitive transition zones, areas where the use goes from a non-residential use to a residential use. And we've just listed that, for lack of a better term, transition areas that require extra sensitivity and extra care as we make good plans for the long term.
Other topics or questions?
Bowling alley, people bowling almost every night.
They used to.
They do,
COVID, I
yeah,
don't
it's
know.
picked up again.
They do.
Their leagues are running again. And he's starting a kid league again.
Kids League too?
Saturday, yeah, this Saturday's the first one. He's
Wow.
gonna start he's gonna let my 5-year-old grandson play. But
Yeah.
6 years up to 17, and he's splitting them into groups, and it's gonna be like, they're gonna learn how to bowl, technique bowling and stuff. I just know that because my guys, or somebody starts.
Cool.
I'm an in.
That's a pretty good end. All right.
Before COVID, they were always packed. I mean, you would go in there on the weekends or during the week, they always had bowlers, but I don't, yeah, but that their case is pretty much for me.
Sure, it would be hard for that to go.
Yeah, it'd be hard to see.
So I don't know how long you've been here.
since the early 90s.
So the mayor would know this. Nyla, well, you would both know this. So I remember when you go down the street and it was Wana Bowl, Cornfield, the bank. There was no mall or anything there. It was just, the Wana Bowl was by itself kind of, and then the cornfield and the bank at the end on the corner. So
When my parents bought the house that I have now, there was no apartment buildings. Those were open fields.
yeah,
On
Yep, that
O'Malley
was it. It was
Street. They were
sporting going
built
back.
after.
And then the motor store moved from Main Street to.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. Yeah. So yeah, that's one of those that's a hard one for me to hear talk of something else going there. So
Sad day of that life.
yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out how to grill. Personally.
Keep some of those farms around. The farm girl.
Yeah. So other things. Anything you'd like to see that we don't have in the community, or things you'd like us to change? Other than how the president determines the budget kind of thing, if you want to see that change. We'll go to a different topic than that one.
I'm just wondering, I see like the noodles and some of the other places going in over by the bank. And again, it gets to the, workforce housing that Madison restaurants don't have staff and where it's more expensive to live here. Besides Quinez, is there anything else that's going on?
What have you guys been approached?
Related to work, specifically to workforce housing?
Workforce housing.
No, so out on the east side, the Heritage Hills neighborhood, the Meridian one, there's a 200-unit apartment component of that was approved 2 months ago. That'll begin construction next year, but that's market rate, so that's not necessarily workforce, targeted toward workforce. Nothing I can think of specific to that. So that's one of the things that when we started the meeting, the CDA is working on crafting policies for money, directing monies toward those types of projects.
So do you have thoughts on that?
I just see the need, I'm not really sure how to meet the need. I'm thinking maybe talking to WMC and, some of the partners that maybe would have a better idea.
Yeah. it's our most challenging topic, but it's not just our topic. I've looked at that entire affordable housing as a much higher level than just our community. And you're seeing it throughout. Define affordable, everybody has a different definition of affordability. Other communities around us, on Prairie, Verona, Fitchburg, Environment, it's expensive to live in Dane County. And if I look at county level, state level, what are they doing to assist in the process as well? It really needs to start there from a funding standpoint, in my opinion. And, you know, we as a community, people who've been here a long time, earn their stripes, so to speak, people who are coming here new, pay more to live in Wanakee than they would in other communities. And what's the reason for that? This is the question I ask so many people. What's the reason for people wanting to live in Wanakee when it's more expensive?
The answer is the schools. I mean, it's always been the schools.
Right.
Okay, I think you're absolutely right. Schools is one. What about after school?
Proximity to Madison on both sides.
As well as downtown. And I'll say this, and I might get beat up for saying it, but when you have the top schools, and people want to come there for school, and your proximity fits west, east, everything of Madison that Madison offers that we don't offer, but it's 10, 15 minutes away, you're going to increase housing costs as a result of that. Automatically, that's going to happen. But having the top schools, people with means have an easier time to get to the place where the top schools are to bring their children. How do you curtail that? Because that is kind of, you have this much housing. Do you want to grow really fast? If we grow really fast, some Prairie, okay, it produces different issues for people. Whether it's the schools, whether it's the types of housing, the ability for the community to absorb the extra costs of just running the community. All those things are happening when you do that. So our approach to growth isn't that we're limiting people from coming here. It's more, how do we keep a standard for our schools? Because we want our schools to be great. I think everybody in our community would agree with that. I don't think there's going to be anybody that says, yeah, we're okay if our schools aren't as good as they are right now. I don't think that's the Wanakee that I know, that I've always been in. But let's keep our schools. And I actually wrote about this in my article this time. It's been a philosophy of the community my entire life that the schools are our priority. Okay, Wanakee is known for schools.
So are you guys going to turn down the $10 million TIF then? Just asking, because that affects our schools.
How does it affect our schools?
Well, it actually affects the taxpayers. So what happens when you give these people these $10 million TIFs is it stays in the TIF district. As the school district grows, then the taxes deeded for the school gets put on the taxpayers who are paying for all the public works. That's how it affects us. I mean, the school system always turns down these TIFs. I think the only one they voted for lately is probably Occupies. But most of them they have voted no on. They have a policy to vote no on them, if you read their policy.
I can get you the voting action, but I actually think it's the opposite, Mary, to tell you the truth. But I can get you there. I'll be happy to send you the voting results because I don't think you're correct on that. I believe there's one that they voted against, which in fact I believe was the Occupy district. So, but I'll get you the voting record.
Regardless, I think it's a philosophy thing when you talk about TIF.
Well, I guess I would like to see the taxpayers in the village have the right to vote on these big TIFs. I don't think it should just be up to the board. I think the people should have a voice. I think there should be a referendum on any of these TIFs that are over, say, $1 million. I mean, a $10 million TIF is a lot for people to absorb.
Okay, so I can't speak to the other board members, but I'll speak to what I think about, if that's okay. I don't want to.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't want to speak for them. You guys are here. If you want to speak, I guess you can. But I will say that from a philosophy, I made it clear with the school district when we had our last TIF. I asked for Steve Summers to join the meeting and talk as the finance director of the schools. Okay? The finance director stated that TIFs are net neutral to the school district, that they don't impact their numbers. Okay? Not my words, his words. All right? I said 2 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, whatever it was, schools are number one. I don't want to do anything as the president to impact our schools in a negative way. The philosophy of TIF is the but-for test. And that's where the gray areas of TIF are, not whether TIFs function and how they work. It's what's the but-for. Is something going to happen if it doesn't? So if we just look right over there, there is the Lamp House building that was in a TIF. And Lamp House may have been able to be built without TIF, but it wouldn't be what it looks like. And it wouldn't have any retail on the bottom. It would have a normal, just regular apartment look on our main street. And my belief with that was they were trying to bring in commercial, and I was feeling that we needed more commercial in our community to go with apartment downtown. I was for that. All right. I was also for a building that is going to last forever. And part of that building, the front and everything around it being brick and stone, is going to last forever. Its value is going to remain, if not increase, because of that. If you look at others, you may not see that. You may have siding. How long is the siding going to be there? How long is it going to last? You can look at a lot of different ways. But, we could have had a normal, regular apartment there. It's our main street. I was trying to say, or I was looking at, we're completely redoing our main street. Everybody knows we had a plan for the whole main street to update it, I guess is probably the best way to put it, for our community. And that's what we did. And TIF allowed that to happen, just like TIF allowed for our candy factory when that was going through. That was a blighted area, different TIF. This was mixed-use TIF. The one in Kilkenny, which the school voted for, included housing and commercial. All right, so there's different types of TIF, and the government, whether you like them or don't like them, is what the tool that they were giving to communities to not put a higher tax burden on residents, not add to the tax burden. That's when they were created. So it's a philosophical difference that people have with regards to them. But the but-for test is where that occurs.
I think Lonnie's been a little lenient on the but-for test, but that's my general opinion.
Yeah, and that's okay. It absolutely is. We have a new person here in the room. Can I get your name?
John Soper, S-O-P-E-R.
Hey, John.
Yes, moved to Wanakee in 2017. So, I was coming primarily to discuss a different angle on TIF because I think, and I fortuitously caught the section of it, because there's a lot of wheels that work with how TIF works and interacts with other aspects of the law and property taxes. And I think it creates effects that people don't always realize. And I agree there's a philosophical issue about TIF. Personally, I come at it from the world's not left right, but from sort of a more right-wing perspective of, with all due respect to Whalers Associates and your staff and the board, I'm not a huge fan of the picking winners and losers aspect of TIF, but people can justify that vote based upon their circumstances. But in 1970s, when TIF came out in the world, and there were no levy limits and there were no revenue limits, it was irrelevant to the overall tax burden because you had complete autonomy in the locals and how to raise whatever they want. That's not how it really works anymore. The school districts, they're on a per pupil revenue limit system, which, yes, does not affect the total amount of money they can raise. But as we're a negative tertiary aided district, as we're a property affluent community, every new dollar of expenditure, every higher equalized value to the community, we lose equalization aid. So that extra dollar we're levying is not levying a dollar, we're levying about 10 to get a dollar, or some higher percentage because we're losing aid on the slope on that aspect. But for the village, and to a smaller extent, the denominator is bigger with the county tax colleges. All three of those, the levy limits are on a net new construction basis. And then the construction that's separated out between what's in the district and across the whole community. So I don't know names here, but whoever is the either economic development director or the village administrator fills out a form to DOR every year and certifies net new construction. That goes through the calculation. There's a worksheet you do, and then DOR spits out how much more levy you can raise. I'm operating under the assumption that most communities are, the village will want to keep it at near the top of the levy limit because it is what it is. You raise the levy limit with growth from the TIF district, but the denominator, as we know, doesn't grow because it's in the district for 20 or 27 years. And the net effect is the middle rate needs to go up on everyone else to cover the new levy growth that the village gets. And I know we're dividing it over the whole village, which I imagine will want to keep several $100 million, so I'm not saying it's a gigantic percentage shift. But the net effect is the community outside the district pays, or outside all the districts together, pay the increased taxing authority the village gets from the new construction in the district. So I would want to make sure people are aware of that. Two, I think it would benefit the community discussion to have that be acknowledged. And so if people are willing to say, I'm okay with that little bit of spillover for whatever goals, so be it. But I don't think that is discussed or presented. And I don't think it's intentional. I think a lot of local officials in Wisconsin are unaware of the interplay there. Of how the village's valuation factors determine it goes up, the numerator is going up, the denominator is not. And then when you close it or subtract portions of it, it comes back on the levy, but there's a closing pump. You get 50% equalized value difference. And so the net result is, you know, something is built into TIF district, something is built out of the TIF district, 30 years later, it's off. The total amount of taxing authority in the village is higher if that development happened in a district than if it didn't, that it happened outside the district. And there's a ratcheting effect over time when you have a lot of tax increment, a lot of growth inside tax increment districts. And independent of the philosophy of when's it good, when's it bad to have public subsidy, that's something I would like to bring to your attention. Or maybe be aware of it, but my experience, a lot of local officials aren't, because it's not obvious from just looking at the TIF statute, you have to see how they interact with other things.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate your comments. I don't think you've ever been to one of these, John. Am I wrong or am I right?
No, it's my first time. I got 3 little kids, and I'm buying pizza for the family so I can come here. So. You know, my wife was thrilled when I said I want to go to the meeting tonight and how long it'll take.
Well, I appreciate you coming. I was commenting earlier that we should have way more people than we have here. Just like when we talked about potentially putting a pool in the community, we should have way more people than we had there.
By the way, don't do that.
Don't
Don't put a pool.
Oh. Okay. All right. So your vote is no on the pool. Fair. But it's good to hear is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
A lot of times, you know, no offense to the group that said we're usually here, they're usually here and they're commenting, but we need a lot more voices. It helps the community, not just the village board or any of the people here. It helps to hear different viewpoints, different points that they're making about why they're for or against things.
And the odd thing about the viewpoints aren't necessarily connected, but the overlap of reasons of why. So, although this isn't exactly relevant, because I got here in 2017, and apparently the perfect time to start, well, maybe it was always this way, to see like a really intense local election was here in the community, and you get a sense of that, the T-wall thing, and then the couple of village elections, and school board stuff, and jumping both feet into the local issues. Unlike these one person spoken before, like, I broadly agree with a contained growth model and some of the things you said earlier. And, you know, I did go through you this last time, because I think I more broadly share what I read about you and some of the other candidates and the challenging candidates. But I would say a lot of the principles that I heard you outline and other candidates, many who were successful outlining about, okay, we want to have orderly growth, a tax levy that's predictable and slow, and all those things. Overuse of TIF runs contrary to them in unexpected ways. Like being pro-controlled growth doesn't mean village controlling the growth by having it orderly, you know, if you have another greenfield development, use a TIF. I'm not an expert on this proposed district, and I'm a public hearing next week on that, since no one's beating down the door to take the microphone away from me, so to speak, right now. One thing I read online was the developer, this is another adjacent property that had been purchased by this developer some years ago, like when they did the fire. And I thought I read that in the newspaper, if I'm misstating it, I apologize, but you talk about what for, and I agree. A necessary precondition philosophically for people who support using TIF districts is, well, if we didn't do something, nothing would happen, or this is necessary. So part of necessary is judging expectations of the market and of the developers. If someone buys a chunk of property on spec, in speculation, and they come to the village and say, we'd like to do this here, and the village does something, and they've been sitting on that, probably putting some corn on it for ag-use values and not paying for anything in holding costs. And they're sitting on it, waiting for the right time to come ask for help with the next round of infrastructure or the next whatever. And I will admit in the levels of offensiveness of TIF, putting in water and sewer to me is less offensive than a cash incentive. You know, but if they're pricing in that they're expecting to get this help, and that can be evidenced by long-term land holding, you know, repeat approaches, I think the attestations of the developer on the but-for side are hard to take at face value because the actions, it may be that the plan they're showing you, they built in the assumptions of it. But if they're willing to buy 40 acres, and they're willing to sit on it a number of years until the time's right to come ask for it, I don't know you, a lot of people who are real estate developers don't make money buying property with no prospect of development sitting on their tables. I mean, they have a plan. So I think that should be, the expectations game, we get known as a community that hands it out. The quality of the deals presented to us will decline because people think that we're someone who, and I see it in my work in other areas of the state where you get communities that routinely do it, and if you look 20 years out, their development in the town next to them that uses sparingly doesn't look that different. It's just the expectation got built in, so everyone said, well, I gotta have 500 grand. And I think that I've not read enough on it for the before next week's public hearing on every aspect of it, but coming at it from maybe speaking a little bit more your language and not the I'm against corporate subsidies or a different angle here is, I combine that with the property tax impact out district, I think it perhaps tips those scales a little bit.
All right, I want to answer this, but I have to ask Todd a question first.
Okay.
All right? Because one of our lawsuits ended up because of a listening session. And I want to make sure I don't say something I can't say.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Generally, I think generally, information that you have from it.
Okay. Okay. So, listening to what you heard, I'm going to talk about a different tip that we had in front of us. And I asked Todd if I could make sure I could say something that occurred in a tech staff meeting. The tech staff meetings happen on Mondays once a month that we go through with all the different things that are happening in the community. Okay? Right? And all the different department heads are there. So, we had a meeting, a tech staff meeting, and Forward Development Group was there. And Hy-Vee was there. And Hy-Vee was asking, or Forward Development Group was asking for TIF assistance. Okay? The land they were purchasing was John Ganser's land. It's where everything is set for the Hy-Vee to be built right now. And Hy-Vee initials comments were, we're going to build in 2023. Okay, it wasn't right away. It was in 2023. That's what their statement was. And next came out was, we're going to need assistance for this development to take place. TIF assistance. And help me if my numbers are just a little off with this, but I think they'll be pretty close. So if they're not 100% accurate, they're close. Their initial request was $5.7 million of TIF for them to be able to do their project. And there was no Festival Foods talked about at this time. Nothing was happening. And my question in the room, and I try to get to as many tech staff meetings as I can. They're on Mondays, so it's difficult with my regular work, but I was there. And Kevin Even was the village engineer at the time. And I said, Kevin, did somebody else just buy the land across the street, which was Don Tierney, who had just bought the Shaneman property that was right across on Q? And he said, yes, they did. And I said, okay. And I looked right at him and I said, how much did you pay for this land? And I believe the number, and correct me, I think it would be close, about $235,000 an acre is what they paid. So I said, okay, Kevin, how much did they pay for the land right across the street? $50,000 an acre. So right away in my head, the calculation went off. How much is the difference if they had paid $50,000 for this land versus $235,000 for the land? That number almost exactly matched the $5.9 million. So I said, how can you expect us to assist with the taxpayers on land that you probably are overpaying for? You're asking for the taxpayers to pay for the part you're overpaying for. Well, that's what we think we need. I said no. And they left. And then they came back. And that number went down to $3.5 million was their request. All right? And again, the numbers might be 3.6, but we're in that general ballpark, okay? And I said, okay, why do you think we should do that? Well, we're going to put some improvements here, and we're going to do some improvements there, lighting, so on and so forth. And I just said, okay. At the same time as this is happening, Festival of Foods is talking about coming to Wanakee. And Mr. Tierney was involved in that, and he came, and I asked him the question, point blank, are you going to need TIF assistance? And his answer to me was, I don't know, maybe. I don't know at this point. And I said, well, that's going to be something that's important for us to know. All right, well, then it was come back again with people from Forward Development Group. Now it's down to $2 million, just over $2 million that they were requesting. And Mr. Tierney says, we're not going to request assistance. Am I saying anything I shouldn't be saying right now? This is all, and this is not a meeting. It's not in closed session.
I don't remember exact figures, except
Okay.
it certainly is accurate that there was a whittling, there was a diminishing
Yeah.
process in our discussions with Hy-Vee on.
None of this was in
on
closed
TIF.
session. This is all in fact staff or those type of meetings. So now we're at 2 million, and Don comes and says, we're not gonna need TIF assistance for our project. So my response to our development group was, and Hy-Vee was, well, you're both gonna get presented. I don't know where the board's gonna sit, but one's coming in with no TIF assistance, and the other one is coming in with. And I haven't really heard anything that's gonna make me change my mind right now on whether I should vote for somebody with TIF request that I don't really understand the need for. Okay, well, we can't do the project without it. And literally 10 minutes before our meeting, that we were making a decision on these, a paper was slid to me saying they were no longer requesting TIF assistance from Hy-Vee and for development group. All right? So, how does this play in the public side? Hy-Vee's not building right now, right? Well, Hy-Vee said right from the start they were going to go in 2023. The only conversations that were had then were they were worried the festival was going in. And so they pushed their timetable and said, well, we probably can get it done in that time frame if we're getting this TIF assistance. Okay? Point is, TIF negotiations happen before they even get in the public purview. Okay, there's a lot of different requests that come for TIF. And we're going to say no or yes based on what that project is. And in this particular situation, Hy-Vee Festival chose to go back, I think, and negotiate with Mr. Ganser on what they were paying for that land. I think, and that's how you're seeing different layouts for happening with the property up there. But point being, that didn't make any sense, how they were going about it and approaching it. How do you think it would have, how would it have played for anybody in the room if we would have said, we're helping somebody to overpay for a property? Who would have been for that? Nobody. And that's what they were trying to basically do. Okay? That's where TIF can be really an awful thing, in my opinion, because if, we'll just say 4 board members were like, oh, we got to get Hy-Vee here now, and we're going to put the pressure and say you've got to be building in a year, and we'll give you TIF then. That could have happened. Very easily. They could have justified, we could have justified a plot 4, as you said, we talked about earlier, there's gray areas to that. But that's an art that's happening behind the scenes, both staff and elected officials, and they're talking to people. It's important. We're guardians of the tax dollar and making sure that we're using tax dollars appropriately. Are there going to be times where I'm for a TIF? Sure. If there was no TIF out there at all and it was gone, great. If the government said we're not going to do TIFs anymore, we're going to eliminate that whole situation that we put in place. Originally, it was great. It was for blighted areas. Those may have made sense completely. We're sitting in a building that was this is a badly blighted area before the library was here. The Village Center and the Cannery Row Apartments, another blighted area that was awful from our candy company. Rotary Pond, what was it known as?
Stink pond.
Stink pond.
Thank you, Zach. The stink pond, okay? That's not something you really want to be known for in your community, is having a stink pond where you don't really want people to go around it. Is that fair to say?
So, how about greenfield versus light?
Yeah, I mean, they're different, is what I'm getting at. But that's where they kind of started, and then they evolved into all these different types of TIF usage. And I hate the fact that part of our government pitted communities against one another. We had businesses come in and say, we don't even really need this TIF. But if you don't give it to us, we're not coming here. Well, that stinks. Go somewhere else. If you want, go somewhere else. But it pits governments against one another, especially those who are hurting right now. I grew up here, if you didn't know that. And our conference of teams was Columbus, Wisconsin, Lodi, Wisconsin. Those are the teams we played against. We were not that much bigger of a community than them. But if you go to Columbus today, Columbus looks almost identical to when I was playing sports in 1987. There's not really much of a change there. All right? Other than when people talk, I hear people say, well, some of our storefronts aren't full yet. Well, if you go there, their storefronts, there's no stores in them. Okay, and they haven't grown, and they're going backwards, they're schools. It's such a total change from that time frame to now, and what Wanakee is versus. Now, Lodi has made a few changes. Then let's talk about the ones that did make changes, and part of it was TIF, that caused the change. Verona. Okay? Verona has probably the largest, most successful TIF in the state, depending on your version of successful. Okay? In the version of what the government sees, that is what it is. Epic was a huge TIF sensation for them. Very few people would argue with that. We were just at a conference in Green Bay. TIF was the topic. And the first words out of the mouth of the person was, there's no other choice. We have to have TIF in our communities. They haven't given us any other opportunities for how we can expand and grow. There's no incentives we can give out to anybody to come here. I view it a little different because I say, well, if nobody had them, we have schools, we have proximity to Madison, all the things we talked about. We have all that. So we could.
Well, TIF was, I believe, 1976, became law, and you didn't get substantial commercial TIFs until the early 90s. I was born in 1983, moved to Wisconsin as a kid in 1987, and I'm pretty sure buildings existed and businesses existed at that time.
Absolutely.
I agree there's a wide swath of gray and individualization of situation. And I face a very tough difficulty in all my local election decisions because I do not stand in the same worldview as a lot of Dade County. I have opinions on property taxes and stable development, but I also don't like some of the tips we did. So I'm in this work of trying to get the village board exactly right, where like there's 4 votes against the tips I don't like, and 4 votes to like not do all this other stuff I don't like. I find it very, very, very taxing. So there is all that variation. I don't deny that, and I don't want to monopolize this forever, because I'm talking. But I would say that in the scales that every elected official is using to weigh this, I would humbly suggest that there is a sort of there's more resistance to TIF across worldview, cross ideology than perhaps assumed, because we're a community with a lot of busy people, and it tends to be a small group of people, God bless them, come to all these meetings all the time, and some guy like me with 3 little kids who's got, I have strong opinions. I rarely show up to all these because timing is what it is.
Sure.
When the children are awake, if you don't generally get out loud. So I would just, for whatever it is, I'm 38, so I represent a second home, Madison, professional commuter group of people that are rapidly populating Wanakee.
Why did you come to Wanakee? If you don't mind me asking.
And funny you say that. My oldest daughter has a lot of disability issues and getting services way on the west side of Madison. We live on the east side of Madison. My wife was commuting rush hour both ways, edge of Beltline to edge of Beltline, getting her to services. We wanted to move closer. We did not want to be in Madison public schools when we get school age for her with her special needs. And so she did the research and picked here. Combination of, it's hilarious to say this from early when I walked in, combination of schools and locations, exactly the 2 things you guys are talking about.
That's a common thing that most people say that move here now. And whether they're coming from Madison or they're coming from Colorado or wherever else, they see schools and they see proximity to services that Wanakee doesn't provide. We're close. So you're one of the normals that come into our community. I'll put it like that.
All right. Quick question or clarification. You mentioned a public hearing next week.
something, I thought I read online, the community development.
Okay, so just for those here and you too, so the public hearing associated with the creation of the new TID 10 is not happening next week, and probably won't be happening next month. We're at the staff level still working on putting together all the elements of the project plan before we bring it forth, because we do want to get it right. So that public hearing that was originally scheduled a month-ish ago for next week is not happening yet.
I think the only thing that's happened so far is we created the joint review board, not about it. No, we didn't.
Actually, not even
no, we
that
didn't
yet.
meet
That
about
was
it.
their-
You're right.
So the whole process for that hasn't, I mean, while we've had the applicant move forward with the request, the creation of the JRB, Joint Review Board, it has not happened yet. So that's, like I said, we're trying to work to bring something forward that's going to work. Otherwise, we won't bring it forward. So that's,
Over 1,300 active kids currently in Wisconsin. You can tell her what to say government, I know. I am now aware of a case where a joint review board was formed and they voted down to creation. I mean, these things are front-loaded. The municipality dominates the conversation. Understandably so, it's the most direct down village. I mean, the county's there, the tech college is there, but I don't think Madison area tech cares that much about our land use and money. Okay? And the reality is, they create a joint review board, you guys partner with someone else in the JRB, fifth member, even if something was controversial, you got voting control. I mean, the decision to go or no goes before any of that ever happens in practice. So, that's good that it's not happening. I mean, there's an awesome chance that things might change. I mean, if there was a public hearing next week, I would, with all respect, I would basically assume it's in the back, because you don't get that far in until you, I mean, how the legislative government works. I mean, you don't call a vote on something that doesn't going to pass. I mean, that's how it tends to work. So.
Okay.
All right, I'll shut up. Let someone else talk.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, we've all been talking the whole time until you came, so. I said we had all been talking the whole time until he came, so it was good to have somebody else come and talk for a while.
Oh, it's,
So the CBA meeting that was gonna do the public comment is not happening
so
in
the
December.
CDA meeting itself is happening.
Yes.
It's just that any action regarding the TID creation is not happening at that meeting. It hasn't been
Okay.
scheduled yet. Formally, I think there may have been a notice at one point in time, but that's not happening.
Yeah,
Action is different from discussion. Is there discussion?
Nope, not next week. Other than an update saying the TID is not moving forward yet. So that's the only, because the CDA, the members were given a preliminary tentative timeline at which the November 16th date was earmarked as that public hearing date, but they've been notified that that wasn't happening at their last meeting. And so there'll be a new updated tentative timeline, that's all.
and we can email in public comments to the CDA meeting. I'm working every Tuesday night till 7, so lucky you guys, I can't make it
Can
today.
you, yeah, share with me my contact information is on the village's website?
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Do you know off the top of your head how close Wanakee is to the 12% equalized value cap?
I'm sorry, say again?
12%
How close
equals.
Wanakee is to 12%?
Oh, to the threshold?
Yeah.
Oh, I think, yeah, we're a ways away.
We're ways away.
Our finance director would know that number, but I don't have my fingertips.
I don't know this either for sure, but I feel like we're at 5 to 6 right in there right now.
Right. It becomes relevant when you get close, because once you hit 12, you can't do new ones. You have to consider your last one for a while.
So you would know this maybe. Middleton's well over the 12% somehow.
I think they were.
They have a gigantic tier that spans those couple of belt lines, so it's like $500 million of value or something huge like that.
Got it. Okay.
The cap only matters for creating a new one. You can go, once you're over it, you can continue to operate your kids, but that's the,
Creation.
yeah.
Yeah. I'll ask one question to see where, and Sam and Nyla, you shouldn't answer this, okay? With TIF, since TIF came up, how do people feel about us extending the TIFs for a year to use money towards housing. 75% has to go to affordable housing, 25% can be any housing. Okay? Do people feel we should be extending those TIFs, or we should close them?
I'm okay with extending them, I just don't see, I see using it or it being used as, well, this is a wonderful thing that we're getting the affordable housing so we can have more tips. I see it being used as a, like a carrot stick kind of thing, I'm not sure that's the right explanation, but.
Okay, it's not using that. I'll tell you that that's not what I look at all. So I'm trying to get a feel, because we made the decision that we were going to be doing this for our healthy TIFs, not our.
Right, no, yes, I might deviate from the people who really want more, are passionate about diverse income housing in the community.
Yeah.
I know, I think extending the years is awesome. There's a commitment made to the community to create the TIF. There's a length of time, 20 years, 27 years, 23, it's environmental. But there's a window, there's a project plan before the voters. Some local official who was elected a long time ago sold it under a certain plan. Then they're like, oh, hey, you know what's really great? We hate the state, they don't let us tax to whatever level we want, but we have a way around it. We can extend it a year under a budget provision that was slipped in 2009, and we can just capture a bunch of revenue and decide later what we're going to do with it. And I don't like that style of government. It's unaccountable because we.
Okay, question to that then. What if that TIF that was slated for 20 years is closing in 8 years?
What the average taxpayer gets out of TIF when it's used well is a healthier tax base upon closing. Because when you close the TIF, even though there is a levy adjustment bonus when you close, the net, I talk about the numerator denominator.
Yep.
Getting its own numerator and denominator, everyone's paying more. When you close, there's a little bit of numerator, but the whole thing comes down to denominator is bigger. It is a marginal tax decrease for everyone else. That's what you get at the end.
Yeah.
So my view is the earliest we get to that, the better. If there's a good idea, it should stand on its own as part of the original plan. If there's a development that.
So I get what you're saying. What I'm asking though is, because you're saying 20 years, that was the agreement, there may be totally different elected officials, or 27, whichever type of TIF it is that we have for length. If all of a sudden that TIF did so well that it's closing in 8 years, that's kind of the way we've looked at it. The TIF was healthy and did well. Now we're going to extend it for a year. That's my knowledge of what we've decided, correct?
That could be that's one way of looking at it. The 20 or 27 is the legal maximum.
Right.
If you had but no, I get that. I do that I'm not a big fan of government at any level getting involved, playing social engineer, doing a lot of the stuff. But if we're going to do it, then we should get it off, back on the tax rolls, out of the special tip category as soon as we can. That's just my preference.
Okay. Mary? You don't have to answer if you don't want.
Extended, so like if
Are you
it's
for us
closing
having a
for
one-year
you
extension?
Closing early, are you discussing if they're closing early or you want to extend it after it's?
No, so just what we've done is we've said, all right, those TIFs that are healthy that are closing early,
Yes,
we can extend it by a year, and those funds, 75% have to go towards affordable housing, 25
Yes.
can be for any housing,
Yes,
which is
I
what we
was on
talked
the
about.
task force, I would be for that,
You would be for that, okay?
yeah.
You be for that too?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay,
If those are the rules, 75% for affordable housing.
And that's what they're actually set aside for, yes. then I
Correct.
would agree with
All
we
right.
can't use it for anything else. That's what it has to be dedicated to.
Definition.
Now, that's what I was just gonna say. The definition, who's making the definition of
Right, yeah,
affordable
what's the
housing?
definition?
And that, right now, and that's set by the state, I believe, or the county. Who sets that?
It's a statute, definition is a statute.
Yeah,
It's what the law,
30%.
I think it's 30%.
30%.
so, yes, and that's a difficult thing.
No, I suspect that the popularity counts, so I expect to lose on that, but
I wasn't trying to get you to lose, I was just trying to get a feel for the room where we sat on that, since we made that decision.
But the tricky thing is it's a one-time infusion of money, and there is always a temptation in government when you have one-time funds to start some program. course, people support it, love it, and maybe it is a good idea, but then you start it, and then you run through that money, and now there's an expectation, and now, gee, we have pressure to add that, find that expense somewhere, and you can use one-time funds, one-time expenses, in my experience, it just doesn't happen very often, because it is, no one wants to hear, we gave a one-time grant to this building to get a 5-year covenant for lower rents. They want to hear, we have this comprehensive plan, we have this many units set aside, things that require ongoing support, but that 1-year cutoff is going to be a one-time pool of money. And
Well, I think like Nicole and Esri, they will always be affordable because they got the federal money and same with the apartments
Yes.
that are by me on O'Malley Street. Those are section 42s. They have to remain affordable because they were originally granted that section 42 entitlement. And so you're talking about somebody's coming in with all this other federal money and they need a little boost. So if they're coming in with all that federal money and tax incentives, they always have to stay affordable.
right.
The ones by me have been affordable since they were built. And I would say that we do not have any more police or fire, maybe BMS house, because there seems to be a lot of disabled people living in those. But there are always people out there saying, oh, we're gonna have more police calls and this and that. I never see that in the area I live in, right? And I'm literally a block and a half from those section 42s. I have no problem living by them.
But if we're coming in with that much Fed money, are we really bridging a gap, or are we just making someone's financing easier? So they can cash out their partner a year? I know business specifics, but my default position is skeptical. You guys on the village board, for your public service, you generally have jobs, you have a lot of things you have to do, you're bouncing 100 issues. The guy coming to pitch you, his entire job is pitching you on that. And they got all the time in the world to come up with a pitch and make it sound just right. And I'm not saying everyone's I'm not saying that they're untruthful or that that's their job, but I mean, if they tell me the sky's blue, I'm checking twice and then checking the National Weather Service. My default level of trust with someone.
So let me get this straight. What you just said, you can look at the sky as blue or you can check with the National Weather Service. How often are they right? I would just look at the sky. I wouldn't go to the National Weather Service, no offense.
I would. The joke is I just trust them so much I can call.
Okay. That's good. All right. Any other major things that people would like? I don't want to, usually we're done at 7:30, but I'm not. I'm open to whatever, so I shouldn't keep you guys maybe, but.
We appreciate that you do these.
Yeah.
I feel like we're on the hot seat sometimes, but
I'll be honest, I never feel like I'm on the hot seat. I think I'm just listening to people. I don't know everything. Mary, if you had won the last election, when you're the village president, you don't know everything that's going on in the community or what every detail is. I don't know what mixture of stuff goes in the roads. I mean, I don't, people ask the weirdest questions like, I don't know the answer, but I'll go to our paid officials that do know those answers and find out the answer. But it's just amazing to me sometimes when people think that you know every detail of everything. I don't know what kind of bulbs we use in the lights either. You know, if our conversation earlier about the dark sky, if somebody would say, what's the, I don't know what that is, but Tim can find that out. You can get us that answer.
Did anybody email the village about that? I did give them your email address. I said, email the village if you have issues with this.
I didn't.
I put you guys under the bus a lot out there. I literally posted your email addresses saying you need to talk to your village about this.
Directing them toward information.
Well, if you're pushing us under the bus, I don't feel like that. You just send them
Okay,
somewhere
maybe not under the bus. If you have a
to
question,
get information.
you need to talk to those guys.
Yeah, the village has many experts that the board relies on continually. So we couldn't do what we do without the staff.
Correct. our village would not function without our staff very well at all. Thank you for your service for the state. You said you worked for the state?
No, I work for state legislators, so I work for those damn politicians, so I'm the worst.
Oh, that's even worse. Wow, I didn't know that. Wow. I'll have to talk to you after the thing goes off, because this ought to be good. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I appreciate it. And you can always reach out to any of us with questions. All right, I'll do my best to answer you as quickly